Zoning committee meeting together, we'll call, and it will, and we're gonna be missing Councilwoman Allison
Yes.
Love tonight, yes. And this is Beth Lottie and myself. Okay. Next.
So here's our meeting agenda. We've already done our call to order here.
Mhm.
So our order of business is to talk about minor subdivision lookbacks, which we discussed at the last meeting, and then move on to nonconformities, wall signs, the rural zoning project, and then you'll have your minutes.
Okay.
So for minor subdivisions, Mr. Roddy, you weren't here last time, so just a refresher for Ms. Cloninger. We had discussed with the committee that our subdivision regulations in the land development code, we identified a need of a clarification that keeps coming up, raised by some folks doing subdivisions, creating a couple lots here and there, but they're creating lots off of parcels that have previously been cut, and they keep getting cut and cut over time. And we have a major subdivision definition, so once they reach 7 lots, that should be a major. But people have the habit of doing 1 or 2 at a time.
So
how
they're
do
trying
we
to
get
backdoor it
That's
without
right.
meeting certain requirements.
That's right. So it's unclear in code right now. It's undefined about how far back in time we should be looking to determine if they're doing a minor subdivision or if it's a major. Because in theory, you could say, well, you know, when the county was first formed, maybe that's when how far we should be looking. Then that would be a little bit unreasonable. So what is reasonable is kind of what we're looking for. So here's that language that we're talking about. Resultant lots of a minor subdivision, including the parent parcel, cannot be re-subdivided into another minor subdivision. So that's by design, so we don't get these P&OP lots going down on existing county highways. We have an example on Davis Farm Road here. So, you know, here's what you would intend for a subdivision to look like if that one parcel were to be subdivided all at once. No lots front on Davis Farm Road or Highway 49. They're all internal. We do it all at one time. But what's been happening here, as you can see, these all front on Davis Farm Road, and they're all really deep lots, and not a lot of frontage, no new roads, so those are all driveways on an existing state road. So here is what the minor subdivisions look like for different jurisdictions. And we had looked at some that had no timeline identified in the code, and I got an answer back from most of those except for Gaston County. I didn't get a reply from them. But you know, some of the ones that had no timeline established had a conversation with Berkeley County, and so they take that date from December 2020, which is when they established minor subdivisions and major subdivisions as the point to take it forward from. Some of the others, Richland County, their minor subdivision is actually at 50 lots. And so almost all, I spoke with their staff, and they hardly have any minor subdivisions because people typically do more than that, or they are doing a road. And if you're doing a road, you're also a major subdivision. So if you do 10 lots in a road, you're a major subdivision. And so because that number is so high, it's not even feasible for them to limit a cumulative 2 or 3 at a time on an existing county road. But from an owner standpoint, it's really, you're leaving a lot of value on the table if you do it that way. Some other jurisdictions, so Rock Hill, I spoke to their planning director. Their code right now is a little vague. It says cannot repeatedly do minors within a short time frame. So they don't have a hard and fast rule. And she actually mentioned if we come up with a hard and fast rule that they'd like to do something similar and look to adopt something that.
So you brought it to their attention, kind of like, hey, be aware.
That's right. They don't have it happen very often because typically it's going to be someone annexing into the city and it's going to be a major subdivision anyway.
Right.
But it's good to have an answer for those niche situations before they come up. And so TK, they similar situation, even a smaller jurisdiction, their limit is at 3 lots, and you can't do them cumulatively at all. So it runs the gamut. Some of them will say a certain time period, like Charleston and Berkeley. Some of them will say, a defined time period, so you can do a minor subdivision now, and then in 10 years you can do another one. And some of them say you just can't do it. So right now we're in that bucket of we have no timeline, no definitive timeline about when you might be able to do that. So some of the potential options that y'all can consider for a change or no change is, clearly you could have no change as an option. We have been relying on, it's uncodified, but there's a similar provision for family exemptions, which is a 20-year time frame. So we've been applying that similarly for minor subdivisions, but it would be good to have something codified. So a couple of different ways to do it would be to set a specific time frame to a number of years, and that would be between 2 and 10, is what we've consistently seen, or to set that to a specific date. So after that date, you can't create another minor subdivision from a parcel that's already been created as part of a minor subdivision. And some suggested dates we could do from 2019, which was the creation of minor subdivisions, and the Land Development Code was substantively updated in March of 22, so those would be pretty good dates if we wanted to do it that way. And just based on fairness, we thought this would be the most fair approach, just because it reaches the goal of the policy to prevent piano key lots, but it also gives a reasonable time frame where someone did a minor subdivision 5-6 years ago before this rule even existed. Well, they wouldn't have to worry about that. But going forward, since the creation of minor subdivisions would prevent them from doing them cumulatively thereafter.
Between the two options, what's staff thinking?
Yeah, that would be, we certainly want to have, we wouldn't recommend this because, that leaves us open for interpretation and challenges, things like that. So, one of these two, and we feel, this is the most fair option of the three.
I was just thinking that, all right, so Debbie had the land, she created a little minor subdivision, and she sells part of it, a nice size off to me, and I was like, well, I didn't know this was going on. Why can't I do a couple more lots? Like, well, Debbie already kind of exhausted that when she had it before you got it. So does that kind of fit some of a possible out? We're closing that loophole on a possible out that way as well?
Yeah.
Because this person said, hey, I didn't know she had already created 7 lots. Now she sold me 15, 16 acres. I wanted to do another. Here's my plan to do 7, 8 more. He said, nah, you got to make them interior now because she's already. It was part of this whole table was the lot, the actual lot size now. But you got this amount, so you have to come interior now.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, and keeping the date, somewhat close to our timeline now, that gives us the ability to recognize a plat that's been stamped as a minor subdivision. Whereas the further back we look, in 20 years, even 10, that's not going to have that type of stamp. So it's really hard to tell whether something was intended to be a minor or not.
Okay.
Well, I think that's fair to me, the 2019, because that's when the creation started.
But if there's no activity on this entire parcel, just now someone just starting up, how do we treat that?
Yeah, so they would be able to, as long as none of the lots that they are proposing to create were part of a minor subdivision
Right.
after 2019, then they could do a minor
Okay,
subdivision.
gotcha.
So if you do one today and it's 6 lots, you couldn't come in tomorrow for another 6.
Gotcha.
And previously that was 20, conceivably based
Yes.
on how you're interpreting it.
Yeah, 20 years ago, yeah.
Sounds fair and reasonable to me.
Okay. Do we make a motion on that? Okay, do you want to make a motion about?
All right, make a motion that we adopt the 2019, 10/21/2019 cutoff to limit additional minor subdivisions being created.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, very good. For the next topic, this is on nonconformities, so I'll turn this one over to Richard.
Hi, good evening. So moving on to a different topic here, nonconformities, and so we figured it would be a good idea just to first paint a broad picture. So, you know, first of all, what is the nonconformity? So it's existing development that lawfully existed prior to zoning or a zoning code change, but it doesn't otherwise comply with effective zoning standards, so what we have today. And then there are 4 different types of nonconformities. First one being lots, so it may not meet the minimum lot standard, so you have like RSF 30, right? So the minimum lot size for that is 30,000 square feet. And if a lot does not have that amount of area, it would be considered non-conforming. Same thing with width and depth. Site improvements, so site improvements may not meet all requirements as prescribed under the current code. So buffers, landscaping, tree save, amenities, parking, those types of things. The third are structures. So sometimes we'll see that a structure may be located within a required setback. So setback may be 50 feet from the edge of the right-of-way, and based on maybe when this house was built, maybe it was prior to zoning, it's at 25 feet. So then that is considered non-conforming. And then the last being a use, which is a use that may no longer be permitted within the zone district in which it's located. So nonconformities happen for a variety of reasons. So they happen because the zoning changes, or for example, maybe a lake lot was developed before the establishment of the 50-foot Lake Wylie buffer. So you may find a house that is totally within the buffer. We do see that. Or things that were developed before zoning was even a thing here in York County. It was 86. And so we do see that as well. So we're gonna focus on a few different sections. So the first being non-conforming lots. So I want to be clear here that there is nothing in the code that prohibits the use of a non-conforming lot. So just because you have a lot that does not meet the, let's say maybe minimum lot size, it does not mean that you cannot develop it. So in fact, we even have a provision that's been written into the code to help folks actually utilize those lots. So it's section 155.1163, and it allows for front, side, and rear setbacks to be reduced by up to 40%. And that is by the zoning administrator, which is me. But the applicant needs to demonstrate that it is necessary to accommodate a reasonable structure, reasonable addition, that sort of thing.
So we wouldn't reduce a setback if someone's trying to build a McMansion on a lot that's too small. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's correct. One thing that we have noticed is that the code does not allow for the recombination of non-conforming lots unless that combination of those 2 lots together results in a conforming lot. So therefore, the potential to lessen a nonconformity is lost, since that's not permitted.
Here's what's not permitted.
So if you have, let's see. Okay, so this sort of illustrates it. So for this, we have a really old subdivision, and this is from 1946. And these lots are approximately 7,200 square feet, so they're 50 by 145. And the current zoning in this area is RSF 30, which means the minimum lot size is 30,000 square feet. So all of these lots, and really, I mean, especially those down in the right-hand corner, which are teeny tiny, are considered non-conforming for area. So what happens sometimes is that a property owner may own a couple of lots, which is what is happened in this case. And they want to be able to merge the two to have a larger lot, to have a lot that's more conforming, so they have more room to build their house. However, because of what the code says currently, since that won't result in at least 30,000 square feet, they can't do it. So in this instance, they'd have around 14,400 square feet. So we'd be stuck with two really, really non-conforming lots.
Right.
And there are only
Instead
other
of allowing
outlets.
them to combine it to make one non-conforming,
Mhm.
Right.
we're stuck, okay.
Yeah, and really their only other outlet to solve the situation is to rezone the property.
So we want to be able to allow them to put those two together, which still is going to make it non-conforming.
Mhm.
we
But less,
don't- Yeah,
yes,
less non-conforming.
yes,
So we get one house versus two houses squeezed in on tiny lots.
yes, and more usable, like
Yeah.
Jeff just mentioned,
That
so.
makes perfectly good
Yeah.
sense.
So, why'd this come up?
Well, I mean, we.
I mean, is this
We're
a
seeing it.
big problem? Non-conforming?
No, just through the administration of the code, we'll observe things that we feel are errors or could be improved upon.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of.
I mean, I
what we're
kind of
bringing to
remember,
tonight.
was this recent?
Yes.
I think we
I
have had a
remember this
rezoning
lady
that's had.
actually.
Yeah, we've actually had
before
a
us.
couple, yeah, in this subdivision.
Did we vote for it?
Yes.
Okay.
But this.
Did we
if
help
were
her
to-
out?
We wouldn't have to change the code, this is something staff could do administratively. I mean, we wouldn't have to rezone, this is something staff could
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
administratively.
So it saves them time, money of going through the rezoning process.
Okay,
Okay.
so that's good. I like that. Okay, so do we make a motion on this?
Well, I think
Oh, I'm
she's
not,
got-
I'm not
she's got
quite
more.
done, I'm gonna do.
Oh, we got more.
I-
We want y'all to have all the information.
We got a lot of
We
info.
won't spend too much time on this. From the research that I did, a good number of the codes that I did look at were silent on this. Or like Charlotte Mecklenburg, they have something where it's a little complicated if it results in more than 1.5 times the width and area required by the zoning district. And then Rock Hill talks about, so changes to make lots more conforming are allowed. So non-conforming lots may be made less non-conforming, for example, by adding more land to them.
Yeah.
So you can see, in this instance, York County, if we were to adopt this change, would make us somewhat of an outlier compared to other jurisdictions, but it's one that we're comfortable with, that we think it's a good idea, it makes it easier for people, and there's no reason not to reduce a nonconformity when we can do that administratively, really.
Yeah, okay.
So a couple of options before y'all, so no change, we just keep it as is, non-conforming lots cannot be combined unless that combination is going to result in a conforming lot. Or y'all can change the code to allow non-conforming lots to be made less non-conforming, for example, by adding more land to them. Yeah.
Now you-
Yes.
Now we can
So
make
now
a
you can
motion.
make it.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to make a motion? Okay.
I make a motion that we adapt staff's recommendation to change the code to allow non-conforming lots to be less conforming. Is that good enough?
Less nonconforming.
By adding more land.
Yeah.
By adding-
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. So,
Okay. So now we're gonna talk about wall signs.
Oh, no,
She's
not
got-
quite,
Oh,
I'm
no.
I
sorry.
got more non-conformities.
More.
I know.
Whoa.
I
okay.
know.
Trying to make people's lives easier.
Three?
Okay, that's
Yeah,
what we-
three
that's what we need to do.
non-conforming? Oh,
Yeah.
gee.
Yeah.
Okay, go right ahead.
Yeah, it's not too bad, it's not too bad. So we're gonna move on from the non-conforming lots, and then we're gonna take a look right now at non-conforming uses. So in this case specifically, residential. So the ability for property owners to add accessory structures or additions to non-conforming residential uses may need to be changed. So I think the pictures paint a pretty clear picture. So residential, so for this example, it is zoned UD, and this parcel is it's really teeny tiny. It's 5,600 square feet, 5,600 square feet. It's currently occupied, has a dwelling unit on it. So if this property owner came in and said, hey, I'd really like to put a small shed at the back of my lot for my lawnmower, or hey, you know, we're having a baby, I'd really like to, you know, put an addition on the back of the house to make our house a little bit bigger, they wouldn't be permitted to do so because residential is not permitted in UD. So you might think, okay, well, how about rezoning the property? In this case, it isn't an option because this lot size is so small. It doesn't even meet our smallest minimum lot size, which is 6,000 square feet for a single family dwelling for RMX 6. And then I have another example. So it's a little cluster of them, but this property here is zoned GC, and it contains legal non-conforming residential uses. So same thing, as such, you know, these property owners are not permitted to add any accessory structures, to put any sort of addition onto their home. So the only way an accessory structure or addition could be added would be to rezone the property to a residential designation. So part of the problem with this one is that rezoning may not necessarily be a possibility because you've got 3 units out there. So you have a duplex, which is that bigger one on the left there, and then you have 1 trailer. I don't know of a zoning designation that would allow something like that. And it doesn't feel good to tell people, no, sorry, you can't do it. So we'll go through this pretty quickly. So we did our research and looked at all of the surrounding jurisdictions. So right now for us, it's not permitted. Anderson County, non-conforming single-family residential structures can be enlarged or extended in any zoning district, provided that the new addition conforms to setbacks. And it means the setbacks for the district in which it's located. And then you look at Greenville County. So they all sort of kind of vary a little bit. Greenville County says non-conforming land uses may be expanded to occupy up to 10% of the additional building area or land area. And then you look at Horry County and they talk about 20%. And then Clover is pretty permissive. So enlargement or expansion of a non-conforming building use or structure shall be permitted, provided that they meet all applicable setbacks, buffer yards, and off-street parking requirements for the district in which it's located. This one was interesting with Gaston County. So it talks about that non-conforming single-family residential or accessory structure may be physically expanded so long as the addition or expansion does not create another dwelling unit and it meets all of the applicable setbacks. And then, let's see, for Rock Hill, residential uses that are non-conforming are permitted to expand, and then TGK is about the same as Gaston County as long as no additional units are being created.
Yeah.
So, a few options for y'all to consider. And it is important, I think, to bring this back to the strategic plan, because I know that has been a big push and a big thing that y'all worked on and that we're trying to implement. So to simplify it and make the county code more user-friendly, and to be able to help folks. It's real people, family, property owners, with solutions in mind. So your first option is no change. Accessory structures, which is, you know, something even as small as a deck. A deck, a shed, or additions cannot be added to legal non-conforming residential uses. Or y'all can consider changing the code to allow property owners the ability to add accessory structures and additions to legal non-conforming residential uses. And then y'all may want to consider, you know, do we want to place a limit on the expansion area like some of the other jurisdictions do? Do we want to allow an expansion provided that there's no additional dwelling unit? So this sort of is a bit of a picture for y'all to take a look at and to hopefully make that a little clearer.
When you say percent of existing footprint.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
go up to
Like a
certain
10%, like some of those other counties
of
did.
the house.
So if like it's a 2,000 square foot house and we allow 10%, then they'll be able to do 10% of that 2,000 square foot addition onto the house. So it'd be what, 200 feet?
Nowadays, if they can afford it, let them build it. As long as they're not getting in the setback areas. If you got a 2,000 square foot house, if you want to add another additional 1,000 square feet to it, as long as you're not getting into the setback areas,
yeah.
I wouldn't think that'll be an issue, because let's face it, if someone's looking to do an addition,
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to.
So as far as the additional dwelling unit, that would be separate from the house, right? It's not like an addition to the house.
So I think what we're
that
trying to
C,
say.
no
No
new
new
dwelling.
dwelling.
unit.
Yeah, so the addition, whatever addition that you put onto the house, it's because my family grew.
Yeah.
It's because I need to
Or
move my
nursery
parents
or
in.
something like that.
Yeah. You know, we need to add an extra bedroom.
So you couldn't do an ADU and rent it out, for example, if you were to
Yeah.
go with that option.
You said ADU? What's that?
Accessory dwelling.
Okay, gotcha. So it's not, as long as it's gonna be attached to the existing structure and not a totally independent structure. Is that what we're saying?
Right.
Allow it, but it has to be attached to.
I mean, you could have
Well-
an attached ADU that has a
Yeah.
separate entrance.
Or
and-
what about a storage unit?
Yeah, that's something to consider as well.
Yeah, for the lawnmower or whatever.
Right.
Mhm.
But yeah,
So it's just not a dwelling
Right.
unit.
right. And I think that's in line with the purpose of UD being a legacy district and not having residential in the allowed uses anymore. So it's intended to phase it out, but this would be recognizing that, hey, this is a UD district that has a residence on it, so maybe let's make it easier for people to utilize the residence that's there, but let's maybe not add another dwelling on top of that.
I thought we tried to get rid of all the UDs.
Yeah. So there's a lot of UD out there, and so the county's been taking kind of a phased approach because it became a legacy district like 20 years ago. So first, you can't rezone into a UD district, and then 10 years later, it was, well, we're going to start pulling uses out of the district so we can accelerate phasing it out, and that started with residential. And now there is a floor area ratio limitation, so there's only so much building that you can do. 6-7 years ago, we had the UD project where people could voluntarily rezone to another district. So yeah, it is being actively phased out because it is a problematic district. And the joke used to be UD stands for you decide, because they allowed everything. And
Mhm.
why have zoning at all if you're gonna allow everything?
Right.
What was the genesis for ED, Janet?
Yeah, so you'll see it mostly around the municipalities, and it was intended to, I think, facilitate the type of development that best suited what the cities were after.
Mhm.
But if they're staying in the county and they can pick whatever they want, that wasn't necessarily happening. So you might have neighborhoods right up against an industrial development.
So how much have we got left of something like this that people would want to?
There's a lot of.
Oh, yeah,
And
you said
it's
it
not,
was
and
a
it's
lot.
not just UD, there are some residents in
Yeah.
C and some other commercial zoning districts throughout the
QC.
county.
Okay.
UD, we did, and that's what I think you were referencing a minute ago, was we did go through that UD rezoning project where we contacted owners that we knew were residential uses in UD and offered to go through the UD rezoning project, offered to rezone their property free. And a lot of people did do that, some did not.
A lot did that.
A lot did not.
I think even,
A lot
Rachel, if you want to go back a couple
Okay.
slides to one of your
Yeah,
examples.
most of those, in fact, that's a good example because some of those,
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
see all throughout there, you've got a lot of UD, but then there's some RSF 30 and 40. So those are folks that opted into the rezoning project for UD and said, yeah, okay, well, I want to be residents, so I'm going to opt for a residential district. But some others, they just didn't
Okay, so
respond.
if you go back to the choices,
Yes, ma'am.
okay.
Do you want this, is this,
That.
is that, okay.
I want to see like the additional, whether we're doing a percentage or unlimited. Go to the next screen. Yeah.
So it's both of those, right? Percentage of existing footprint and
If we
then
do
no new dwelling.
No, you don't have to. So.
We just do one of those.
So yeah, you could do yes, and you could say, so it's trying to break down your decision points. So
Mhm.
do you want to say yes, or we want to allow expansion of an existing residential use? Do we want to say, do whatever you want, as long as it's residential? Or do you want to have some limitation to it? And if you do want a limitation, do you want it to be a percentage of the existing footprint, and/or no new dwelling units?
Can we not say unlimited expansion, as long as it doesn't enter the setbacks?
Yeah, that's, some other codes make that clear, and they kind of spell that out in the specific provision, but our code wouldn't allow them to do that anyway, so there's no need to kind of spell that out. It's
Okay.
implied in the code.
So I feel like maybe you're talking a little bit about what Gaston County does, which says a non-conforming, single-family residential or accessory structure, shed, garage, may be physically expanded so long as the addition or expansion does not increase the number of dwelling units, and so long as the front, side, and rear yard requirements of that zoning district are met.
Yeah.
I used to enforce Gaston counties. I believe it's the same one. Code on this. The reason they differentiated that is you could expand the structure. I believe this may be the same still today. I'm Jeff Kershaw, by the way. This is zoning. You could expand the structure within the setback, but you had to get a special exception for that. For example, if you had your existing house didn't meet the 25-foot setback from the road, but it was 20 feet from the road, and you wanted to do an addition to the side, as long as you didn't increase the nonconformity by getting even closer to the road, you could get that addition approved that's 20 feet from the roadway with the special exception. And I think that's why they differentiated it and had that specific language, because they had another section about if you did want to do an addition that was going to be within the non-conforming setback.
That does not increase the dwelling.
So are you?
Just say does not increase the number of dwellings?
Mm-hmm.
Does not increase.
Oh, was he? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was
I'm
looking
sorry.
to pull that part out, does not increase the number of dwelling units. Okay. We need a motion. Are we gonna go with that one? Something similar to that one?
Which is,
Gaston
yeah, but
County.
I mean, you bring.
Oh,
it
in,
back up. So is that similar to Gaston?
If we go with the
The
yes
second one,
and unlimited.
Yeah, so if you follow the decision tree, you say yes with the limitation option, and you'd be
No
only
new
selecting no new dwelling
Yeah,
units. Yep, that
that's
would
what I
be
got.
exactly what Gaston County did.
okay. So you gonna make the motion?
Mhm. I have it here. I'll make a motion that we adopt staff's recommendation, change the code to allow property owners the ability to add accessory structures and/or additions to their legal non-conforming residential uses that doesn't increase the number of dwelling units. Make it right.
I second that.
Huh.
All in favor?
Aye.
Beautiful.
Okay.
We love a very specific
Yeah,
motion.
no,
That was great.
Okay.
All right, so one more non-conforming section and then I'll be done. We're gonna switch gears here and then we're gonna talk about non-conforming, non-residential uses. So it's sort of like how we just talked about adding accessory structures or small additions to a commercial use may need to be changed, and this is something that we're hoping y'all will take a look at and consider. So again, I think the examples and the pictures paint a really clear picture. So a while back, staff was approached by a property owner who has this legal non-conforming gas station, and they wanted to construct a really small addition at the rear of their building. I think it was because they wanted to install a new cooler or something that was going to bump out or something like that. And unfortunately, we had to tell them no, because gas stations are not permitted in NC. So that example, and then we can go on and just sort of talk a little bit about how the other jurisdictions look at it. So right now it's not permitted. Anderson County says that you can do it if you get a special exception from BZA, and here's you can do a max of either 500 square feet or 25%. Same thing sort of with like Greenville County. Okay, you can do 10%. Sounds like that doesn't require anything beyond administrative approval. And Horry County, they're the same, and they're saying 20% if they can meet all the other setbacks or all the other requirements, setbacks, height, that sort of stuff. Lexington County is pretty permissive with up to 50%. And Richland County is, they're a bit more restrictive, so a non-conforming use of a structure may be enlarged into portions of a structure that existed at the time in which it was developed. So for example, if you have like a warehouse and maybe warehousing isn't permitted within that particular zone district, that use isn't permitted, you've got this building and they, a quarter of the, or 25% of the building maybe was office. They don't need that anymore, and they want to convert that office space to warehousing. So I think that is sort of what that addresses. Same thing with Spartanburg County. They're about the same as Richland. Charlotte-Mecklenburg said it's not permitted. Clover said enlargement or expansion of a non-conforming building, use, or structure, it shall be permitted. So they're pretty permissive, so long as you meet all of the site development requirements. So in this case, setbacks, buffer yard, off-street parking, that sort of stuff. Gaston County, a non-conforming use may not be physically expanded through additions to the structure except when they get a minor modification, and that's issued by the zoning administrator. So it sounds like that is at administrative level application and permit that they would need to get. And then Rock Hill, they can only expand with a special exception, which needs to go to BZA. And if the board needs to make the finding that the expansion will have no adverse impacts on surrounding property on the surrounding area. And TGK is the same as what we talked about, sort of with like Richland and Spartanburg County. You can expand into that already existing building, but you can't add on to that.
So I think what the table will show you is it's a reasonable approach to do it either way, that you don't permit any expansion of a non-conforming use because maybe the county is interested in attritioning out uses that don't conform to the district, but it's also appropriate to allow minor expansions, and all these jurisdictions do it a little bit differently if they're willing to accommodate that.
So in this case, we determined that taking a look at this and potentially changing this would implement 2 sections of the strategic plan. The first being sort of simplification, more user-friendly, and being able to provide solutions for folks. And then the second is helping out small businesses. So for the example that, that gas station. So some potential options here. So no change, leave it as is, can't do anything. Or you can consider changing the code to allow property owners to add a reasonable amount, between 10, 20%, whatever it is that y'all feel is appropriate, to their existing legal non-conforming non-residential uses. You can consider, okay, well, maybe we just want to let them expand within the building. We don't want that footprint expanded. Or, you know what, let's just go the special exception route. And they need to go to BZA if this is what they want to do. So, sort of the visual for this. So obviously no being no change. And if y'all do decide that yes, this does need to change, some, you've got sort of 3 options.
I had another issue on Sutton Road, I think it was. It's like, I want to say a car lot or something.
Okay.
It was an antique building.
Mhm.
It was really old.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that old building, and then they wanted to expand
Yeah,
or
I think
something?
some
And if
folks
they had
wanted to repurpose
expanded,
it.
it would be right on Sutton Road. I mean, it was just like, so
So we would have gotten into the setbacks, so.
that would, yes, but I think that, I don't know if they went to BZA, but I'm leaning toward a special exception because I think they're able to maybe bring their case a little bit more into depth with that type of a situation. I mean, we were like given, 10 minutes on it or something to decide whether they could do that or not. And that would have been a bad thing if they had done it, if they had been allowed to do it, so.
So would it not have gotten caught at the administrative level?
Yeah, so whether or not, if they were to expand, no matter what the expansion criteria might be, the code already captures that they can't go into the
Can't go into
setback.
the setbacks.
I think this was behind though or something.
Could you walk me through an example or two of the use expansion internal to the existing building?
Yeah, so.
Internal.
Yeah, so if you had, say, you had a warehouse with a substantial amount of offices internal to the building, and maybe you needed just one office, you needed a caretaker for the warehouse, and you wanted to expand the warehouse use into the full warehouse, that's an intensification of the use, that's an enlargement of the use, and we're assuming that that's not allowed in the district in which the property is located. So technically, they wouldn't be able to do that. We probably wouldn't hear about it, they probably just do it.
Because it's
But-
inside the
It's under the
building.
same
Yeah.
roof.
That's
Under the
right.
same roof.
Just knock down walls.
Yeah, but technically that wouldn't be allowed. So something, and that's probably the least offensive of the options overall is, it's into the internal of the building. No one's really going to see that anyway.
And why wouldn't, I mean, why would it be so bad if they increased under the same roof? Because if you're already driving forklifts over here.
Well, under the same roof would be okay, but once you're getting 10 to 20% and you're already on a small, isn't this considered a small lot or non-conforming?
It doesn't necessarily have to be, I mean, you could have a situation where they both have a non-conforming lot and a non-conforming use, and that gets much more complicated. But
Yeah.
you could assume that a lot of these are on a conforming lot size.
Well, I just know in all that listing of all those counties, there was more that had to go in front of the BZA or special exception.
Mhm.
It seemed like to me.
I think there might be only,
Like Rock Hill, see a special exception granted by the
yeah.
BZA.
I think if you were to tally them, I think there only might be 2 or 3 that do it that way. But yeah, it's definitely an option, and it could be a staggered option too. You could say if you expand a nonconformity at all, you go to the BZA, or you could say if you can do a 10% expansion administratively, and if you want to do more than that, you go to the BZA for a special exception. It could be structured any different number of
Saying if they
ways.
go over 10, go to the.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. I mean, because you're kind of giving them a little bit of an out, but, as a small business is gonna be more apt to do this than a house. Because you're trying to get more bang for your buck on your small business.
Well, this is addressing,
No,
non-residential.
non-resident.
Yeah.
This is your small businesses and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of applicability here is you've got a family business that's been in business forever
Yeah.
before zoning, and they just
Mhm.
happen to,
Yeah.
generation to generation, and then maybe they want to expand in the future, and their zoning doesn't match when they started.
True. So what you gonna say? I'm curious. Curious minds want to know.
So I have to go to the ZBA, okay. All right, so I make a motion that we adopt option number 2, which allows property owners the ability to add up to 10% of their existing legal non-conforming non-residential use if more than 10% must go to the ZBA. Better get it?
Yep.
Okay. What, should we add something about the internal existing building? You wanna add anything about that, expansion of use for the internal, see, to an existing building? Or just let that go?
What are we achieving by putting that there?
Well, because they could add, like you say, we probably will never know that they added a
Because it's
room
gonna
for
be
their.
same, it's gonna be under the same.
Yeah,
I think it could be helpful to add it just to clarify.
Okay. So what am I adding?
I look at upfits on it, so commercial upfits could come in, and I don't know if I have a really good example, but sometimes you have a zoning use that's allowed in, like a general commercial district that's not allowed in a different commercial district, or type of industry or something like that. It's not allowed in different districts, so I believe the internal would still be, could it still be covered by the 10% and then going for a special exception? Not just physical expansion, but internal expansion, right?
I mean, if y'all wanted to look at it, if y'all wanted to phrase it that way, that it's just 10% across the board, both internally under the same roof,
Oh, yeah.
and
Mhm.
10% of an addition.
And I think it sounded like you all weren't offended by it expanding to the entirety of an existing building if that were the case. So if that's your intention, I think it's helpful just to add, you could allow the expansion of an existing non-conforming use internal to an existing building, period. And then if you wanted to expand the footprint, that would be the 10% limit.
So what if, so we're limited, so you couldn't do both?
You could, if
Yeah,
you want it
you
structured
could.
that way. And I think that's what I'm hearing from you. Correct me if I'm
I
wrong.
want to allow it, I want them to be, okay, so you can expand the footprint as
By
well as.
10%.
Yeah, and as well as whatever you want to do under the existing roof.
Yeah.
So which one gets us there?
Yeah, so I think the motion as is, and then if you want to add on and also to explicitly allow the expansion of a non-conforming use internal to an existing building.
And also allow, what's the last part?
Yeah, expansion of a use internal to an existing building. So you captured both, because otherwise, it would be one or the other, but I think you want both.
So I can just add and also allow expansion of existing use. All right, let's take it from the top. All right, I move that we adopt option number 2, which allows property owners the ability to add up to 10% of their existing legal, non-conforming, non-residential use. If more than 10% must go to the ZBA, and also allow expansion of existing use. Okay.
Inside an existing
Under
building.
the existing building?
Yes.
Existing building.
Interior to an existing building.
Interior
So I gotta put interior, we're not putting interior. And I also allow,
to an existing building.
And BZA is a special exception.
So what is a non-conforming, non-residential use?
So any use
What
that's
is
not
a
conforming that's not residential. So like Rachel's example, here's a gas
Was
station.
the gas station?
Yep, it's in
Okay.
neighborhood commercial. It's not
Yeah.
allowed in neighborhood commercial.
Yeah, that could
Anything else?
I'm not gonna read this again.
Because you could have a commercial shopping center that has multiple suites. You
Uh-huh.
could have a use not allowed in that district anymore, or maybe it's just been there such a long time that it just predates zoning. They could expand to the next suite and increase their footprint. That would be internal. It's not
Yeah.
actually expanding the building, it's just taking over more area in the structure, like another
Mhm.
suite,
Right.
or expansion within an industrial building.
All right.
Okay, so, you made the motion. I second it. All in favor? Aye.
So were we good on the motion? Voted?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wall signs.
Hi, I'm Jeff Kirshner. I do a lot of commercial zoning and I look at a lot of the wall sign permits. So we wanted to bring you an option to maybe modify the wall sign standards that are currently in the code. The issue is a couple things. One is currently the way the code, and you look at the table there, allows one sign per wall. So if you have like a building wall, just one sign. For a smaller building, single tenant, that might be fine, they just have a smaller wall. But you can have a situation where you have these larger retail centers, and I'm going to show some examples, that want to have multiple signs, not just their business identification sign, but
Yeah.
other information that could be considered wall signs. And if it's on the same wall plane, right now, I don't think we could allow it. It doesn't come up on everything, but on these larger buildings it can. And the other issue could be that currently we only allow up to 200 square feet of wall sign area. Again, that covers most of your buildings, most of your smaller single tenant commercial buildings. They might not have a wall. And another thing is that the allowance is 1 square foot for every 1 foot of wall width. So it's a 100-foot wall, the length of the wall. You can have up to 100 square feet of wall sign message area. But when you get over 200 square feet of a wall, so for like a shopping center or a big box retail or an industrial building, that can be kind of limited. And we wanted to see if the council and this committee is interested in maybe modifying those standards. And I wanted to show some examples, well, maybe go over the reasons why to allow one wall sign. We already allow one wall sign for multi-tenants, so it does say that if you have a different suite, that each suite can have its own sign. So there are buildings that do already have multiple wall signs, so, you know, on one wall plane, it's just different tenants. And we've had that for a while. That's been the case. But the county does have buildings, even single tenant buildings, just one business, that already have multiple signs. And I'll show you examples, and I'll just kind of flip back and forth. So like the Harris Teeter, this is the one on 70s. So kind of familiar with this. Is a shopping center, so there's even more that goes down with other tenants other than the Harris Teeter. But you can see the Harris Teeter has a Starbucks kind of in there. It's not even really a separate suite. It's just kind of in the Harris Teeter, I believe. And a pharmacy is part of the Harris Teeter, and they say it's open 24 hours. Other ones say groceries, other ones say pharmacy. They say these kind of things. And of course, the main Harris Teeter is this identification sign. Here's another one. This is Fort Mill Ford. This is an older building. Some are using established examples. You know, they've been here for a while. And you can see they have the Ford emblem.
Mhm.
They also have Fort Mill. And they also have the service area that's visible from the road. So they do have multiple signs on the same plane. But you can see they serve different functions.
Yeah.
This is an example of an industrial building. It's Black & Decker. And this is on Carowinds Boulevard. It's a particularly large building, and I wanted to point out the 200 square foot sign, the limit. I looked up the code, I could look up the permit for this, but it's been there for several years, but that's 200 square feet of signage. So on a larger building, 200 square feet is a pretty good sign. But on a large enough building, you know, it's not that big a sign.
Looks pretty small.
It looks pretty small, and that's a 900-some foot length of building right there. So when you get into larger scale, sometimes you have an issue with the 200 square feet total wall sign limit. So that's what I'm saying. If you already have buildings that already have these multiple signs, multiple wall signs, even just for one tenant, just have different information on them. And we looked at other jurisdictions, and a lot of them do allow more than one sign. They don't have a limit on wall signs, or they have more than one on a wall. Reasons to possibly modify the wall sign area maximum. Large building walls may need more than the maximum 200 square feet to display signs, like we just showed with the Black & Decker. I think they're fine with it, but you can see if there was a large warehouse building like that, or a large retail building, and they had multiple tenants,
Yeah.
you start to get up to that 200 square feet total limit.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could even look at it from the standpoint of, could the county allow even larger than a 200 square foot wall sign? Other jurisdictions, when we look at that chart, do allow many of them over 200 square, more than 200 square feet total sign area. As we'll see, there's the other jurisdictions sometimes allow 200 square foot sign or more or less, but then they allow the multi-tenant to increase that up to maybe a certain percentage or a certain max. And the way we can modify the maximum wall sign area, if you choose to do that, we can do it different ways based on zoning district, based on the type of use, based on percentages or certain types of buildings. So there's different options. Again, these are just some examples of existing buildings within county jurisdiction. Just to give you kind of a reference. Here's the chart of different jurisdictions. You can see most of the other jurisdictions don't limit wall signs. There are some. There's something also to point out. Most of these jurisdictions, our sign code is content neutral, message neutral. A lot of these codes, I haven't looked through all of them, I had to kind of interpret it. It's based on, they'll have a standard for the business identification sign and maybe other standard for other kind of wall signs. But we just treat it all as wall signs. We don't delineate what they're doing,
You should get
just
200
where
square
they're,
feet.
where they're located, how they're fixed, how big they are, what district they're in. So some of these I had to kind of interpret, how we apply it to our standard. So it might not be a one-for-one. But you can see with number of wall signs, most of these jurisdictions I looked at do not give a specific limit. They let the other standards be the limit. The max percentage, the max area allowed based on the linear foot, or some kind of just caps standard, like we have a 200 square foot. But they're also very different. You can see there's a lot of variety with them. Some don't limit it, but just based it on percentage of area, everything from 5% to 25% I saw. A lot of them do it 1 square foot of wall sign for every foot of wall. Some even allow 1.5 square foot for every foot of wall. So they have a lot of different options. And so some of the potential options is just not to change and just keep it as it is. Option number 2 is to do not limit the number of signs per wall, but just keep the max sign message area to 200 square feet. That's the max size of any one sign or cumulative signs. And then the third option is, I gave 3 different options, like sub-options to number 3. Do not limit the number of wall signs and allow more options for maximum wall area. We can increase the total maximum area for multiple signs, keep the 200 square foot for any individual sign. What that means is there's no one sign that would be over 200 square feet, right? But when you have a multi-tenant or a building that's larger, that's over 200 feet in width, so like say that big warehouse, they could have other signs. So maybe one's 200 square feet, but another one's 100 square feet or something like that, or 2 that are 200 square feet, but not go above that 200 square feet maximum that's already in the code. We can also have the option to increase the maximum area for an individual sign or the total wall message area. So obviously that would just mean an individual sign and not have that limit, that 200 square foot limit, and look at different options for that. And then another option would be to allow increase in maximum wall area, but only for certain zoning districts or sign districts, or by uses or by special exception. We have different options. I think we're looking for some direction to see if the committee, is interested in changing the one wall sign per wall and looking at a possible increase, increasing the total wall sign area, or because we could provide some detailed options.
If you want to go to the next slide, I think you got the same type of
Okay,
decision.
so let's go to Harris Teeter, because Harris Teeter had a couple of different messages. So their amount of square footage, did it equal, I'm assuming, 200 square feet for the total of their different signs, or how does that work? How did that work for Harris Teeter?
That one's an older one, so that's what the issue we would have now if we didn't have the change of 200 square foot, because that sign, the main Harris Teeter sign, I don't have a permit for that because that's an older development, so I don't know if we even have a permit system for that.
So
that could
they
be-
wouldn't be able to do that today,
Correct.
based
That's
on
And
our
I-
200.
And we do have a Harris Teeter coming in, so we just got
Right.
questions that I'm going to have.
And I see nothing wrong with that.
I see nothing wrong with that. So which one of those options is
That's
that?
the simplest process.
That's the
Yeah.
one,
It
that's the
would
one I
be-
like.
It would be.
Not that I shop at Harris Teeter. so.
It would be option number 3, and then we'd have to give you some terminology of what that maximum total wall sign area could be.
May I ask a question?
Go ahead.
I haven't gotten this far in my required reading yet on the ordinances, but can you explain the sign districts to me? For example, like, is it based on road hierarchy or other type of criteria?
The sign districts are tied to the zoning districts.
Okay,
So, so a big catch-all for most of the commercial ones we're looking at is the commercial industrial sign district. It
Mhm.
covers your general commercial, your light industrial, your industrial district. A lot of your, basically everything we're looking. All these, this is general industrial, this is general commercial,
mhm,
this is general commercial, and this is light industrial, I think.
okay,
So that sign district would capture those examples.
understood.
Now, we do have a small, small commercial district, that's another sign district, that captures your neighborhood commercial. And then you have your residential. So you do have, like, say, non-residential uses in residential districts like churches and maybe schools. You have apartment complexes in a residential district. So you can have some larger buildings that are on a residential district that are non-residential uses. But the majority of your sign permits for like commercial and industrial is gonna be in that CI sign district.
And the only district that's not tied to a base zoning district is the Lake Wiley sign district,
Right.
and that's tied directly with the overlay district.
Mhm. Thank you.
All right, so we need the option that gets us close to allowing
Here's Teeter to do its thing.
for light
That's
businesses.
nice.
Yeah, or light businesses, yeah.
So then we're gonna be on 3.
So number 3,
To make a choice.
Yeah.
And so maybe what's helpful, and this is just a suggestion, can you go to the decision matrix, Jeff? Because I think where we're at is going into the yes column, and we're saying, yes, a number of signs, no limit probably, I'm guessing. Because in the jurisdictional comparison, it's either one or unlimited, and you're controlled by some other factor, whether it's the size of an individual sign or overall limit. And we can come up with, and maybe you could, not ask for an ordinance at this time, and we can bring you some examples of how the other pieces of the puzzle here, the area per sign and the total sign area, how those could be controlled in different ways, and give you some other options at your next.
I mean, it could be percentage.
Mhm. Yeah, as I like to say, there's a bunch of ways to skin the cat, and
Yeah.
signs.
Oh, please
is
don't skin
definitely-
it.
And the signs are definitely one of those. There's so many different ways you can control it.
So what are we saying here? That we're
Let's-
really not gonna have a
We're not
motion?
gonna make a motion for them to kind of develop it out to
Yeah.
bring it back to us or to the council to look at.
I really like the idea of the percentage, but I think the challenge may be, how do you calibrate the percentages, maybe toward different kinds of buildings or developments?
Yeah.
Because it may be more appropriate to do less or more, depending upon the scale, or the type of use it is.
Yeah.
But I think that even though you're pigeonholing a percentage, I think that offers some flexibility.
I think if we can get above, I'm looking at the greater than 200 square feet, we definitely need to be able to allow that part. Because we already, 200 seems to be a problem now for the larger buildings.
Yeah.
So we want to be, at least be able to incorporate,
Yeah, at least in terms of the total, maybe
Yeah.
not per sign. but-
yeah, part of the total.
Yeah, the Rock Hill one changed, but for some of the places like the Harris Teeter, when I was at Rock Hill, we used to do, you could get 1 square footage sign per linear foot of building footprint. So if the Harris Teeter section of that shopping center was 400 feet in length, they could have a 400 square foot sign, or they could have a 200 square foot sign, and then a 100 square foot sign, and a 50 square foot sign, and a 100 square foot sign. And then the suite next door, if it was 50 feet in width, like the Jimmy John's or something, they had a 50 square foot sign allowance on that suite.
Right.
And I think there were a couple of options that some other local governments that did something like that. With the multi-tenant buildings, that was.
That sounds reasonable.
Yeah, and to Tom's point, there's a bunch of different levers that you could use in tandem. So if you want to get context appropriate, you could say, well, maybe it's appropriate for the commercial industrial sign district, that CI, to have 20% of the wall area be signage, but maybe for the small scale commercial, it's 10 or 15. So you could apply multiple levers at the same time to get at the best answer.
Well, could you
But that
guys,
gets complicated quickly, so that's why I don't
If
want you to feel rushed to make a decision.
if you work it up on that angle and bring some examples, that way we can have that visual of what this will allow, and I'll just show what it wouldn't allow.
Yeah.
I think that'll help us, because it's,
When's Harris Teeter need an answer?
I know, right? I was thinking about that.
It's like, okay.
I'm already-
They got a little bit of time.
I'm already talking to them, but the signs is, well, they've already shown me some examples, and so, which is kind of similar to the other
Yeah.
one, you know.
Okay.
so they.
Okay,
got
so
the
we're,
framework.
so we're just gonna let this one ride and let you guys come back to us.
Yeah, we'll give you some examples of how this might permutate, acknowledging that we're saying no limit on the number of signs, and then we'll give you some examples of how to control it.
Okay. Sounds good. Moving right along.
All righty. Now to the rural zoning project, and I want to start with the rural to urban transect here. This is kind of part of the planner's Bible toolkit, so it might look unfamiliar to you all, but I can't tell you how many times I've seen this image over the years. And so this is really a good framework.
Now, this is what you're changing, or you're working to kind of redevelop our,
It's, part of a project to examine the rural zoning districts, how they're working or not working.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Which was born in this committee,
Right,
went to the full council,
yes.
and it's kind of been there, now we're trying to
Yeah,
get
back again,
in
yeah.
this form.
But
So
now,
now it's
is this
the-
the current?
So,
Right.
I'm getting, well, I'll get through it, but I just wanted to start with a 30,000 square foot view to get into the project in more detail. But the scope of the project, the scope of the ask and the task at this point is larger than when the topic first came up to you all.
Of course it is.
So,
That does not
yeah,
surprise me.
it's a more encompassing look, a more comprehensive look. And so that's why I wanted to start zooming out a little bit. So, this is a good framework for what development looks like across different jurisdictions. And so you have your natural zone, you've got your rural zone, your suburban zone, and you start to get into the urban. And really about here is where your county stops. We don't really have anything outside of municipalities that goes into these transects. So this is really the space that we operate in, T1 through T4. And for this rural zoning project, we're only looking at what might be appropriate for zoning districts in these parts of the transect. So your natural areas that are vacant or large farms in your rural zone, which is your farms and your large lot residential living. So we're not, as part of this project, we're not looking at anything beyond that.
Okay.
And here's another view of that same transect, but it's in a wedge. And that's by design to show you that in these areas, we're talking about really land-intensive stuff in terms of acreage, and then the uses and the types of development require less and less land the further you get into that transect.
Yeah.
So that's what that's trying to demonstrate. But for the purposes of this project, this is what we're talking about, operating in this space. We're not looking to get into the suburban stuff. So here's the proposed project scope, and at this point, we're formulating the project, and so this is what our proposed draft scope is looking like at this point in time. But we really want to work closely with the committee to make sure on the outset that we're on track, that we're capturing everything that we need to capture before we start putting a lot of man hours into this project. So there are four main things that this project should be looking at. And the first and most important is purpose. What is the purpose of each rural zoning district? And are the purposes distinct? Because you might have 10 rural zoning districts, but do you need 10? If they're not distinct enough, do you have too many? And that's creating too many complicated problems by having so many if there's not really a major difference among them. Because some jurisdictions,
As
they
in
might have...
what? Give me examples. Are you going?
Yeah, so for example, we've got AGC and AGC1, RUD and RUD1, and I'll get into that in the next slide. And then we've got RI and RC, and some jurisdictions, even large counties like we are, they've got an agricultural district and a rural district. That's it, just 2 districts. So do we have too many? Do we have too few based on lot size? Things of that nature will be captured in purpose. And really purpose drives everything, because all of the zoning code provisions that follow after should be meeting your purpose. And if they're not meeting your purpose, you're designing all the provisions incorrectly. So we want to make sure that we've got the right purpose, and that everything that follows thereafter addresses that purpose and meets that purpose. And so that gets into the second part of the project, would be implementation. So does the implementation of each district and the related code provisions that are associated with those districts, that are more common in those districts than, say, your suburban areas or your commercial areas, does that match the intended purpose of the district? And collectively, do the rural districts implement the comp plan? That's the whole purpose of zoning, is to implement your comprehensive plan. So if your zoning code is doing something different than your comp plan is saying it should be doing, then one or the other needs to change, right? Another important part of this is outreach. So we want to do stakeholder focus groups and have community meetings. We really need to get out and talk to rural residents.
Yeah.
We need to talk to farmers. We do need to talk to developers that are operating in this space today and are looking to operate in it in the future. And also, we want to empower our planning commission to have voice into this project as well. And they're already talking about it. They're already spitballing some ideas themselves about how to make our rural districts better. And so what does the community see as something that's appropriate for rural areas in terms of both uses and lot sizes? If I've got 20 acres, am I okay or not with having 1 acre lots across the street, that type of thing? And so the last leg of this would be options. So after we've compiled everything, do we know what our purpose is? Is our purpose right? Are we implementing things, or do we need to change how we're implementing it? What's the community feedback on all of those things? Then we'll come forward with options. So what could be changed so that we have as much alignment as possible with the comp plan, with each of the zoning districts, and with the community expectations, because you want all of those to align. That's really difficult to do, so especially when you've got an existing zoning code. It's much easier if you start from scratch and you're going to create the perfect zoning code, because zoning's been around for more than 100 years at this point. So it's easier to design a perfect code than it is to monkey with an existing one, because you have all the threads that you start to pull, and the whole thing starts to unravel, and you're impacting people in negative ways that you don't intend to do. So that's a big part of considering potential changes at the end of the project. So one of those questions is, does the plan or district purpose need to be changed? So, if our plan is, say our districts are implementing the plan, but that's not meeting what the community expectations are, that's saying, well, we probably need to change the plan, and then the code needs to follow those changes thereafter. And what are the outcomes to land use into the future for potential changes? So we don't make decisions in a vacuum, because we all know there are consequences to every change. Sometimes you might see it right away and know what they are and expect it ahead of time. Sometimes you might not. So we'll analyze what some of those changes could be and what the outcomes of those changes would be. And so that will certainly be text amendments. I feel pretty confident about that. But does it mean we have fewer districts? Does it mean we have more districts? And if we start having those conversations, then we're talking about county-initiated rezoning for big chunks of the county. So that could be a result of the project. So we want to be open-minded about that. So here are the zoning districts that we're talking about: AGC, AGC1, RUD, RUD1, rural, commercial, rural, industrial. And the intent of the districts is kind of in the name already. Agricultural conservation, right? That's the purpose of the district, and there's language in the code that has a paragraph for each. What's the purpose of those? But the titles are pretty good: rural development, rural commercial, rural industrial. So what are those? Do we need all of them? Could they be consolidated? Do we need more of them? things that we'll look at that we hear come up quite often is uses, or do we have too many uses in some of these districts that are in conflict with one another? Are there not enough uses? You know, to that earlier question, are all the rural needs met? So are there uses that would benefit farmers that aren't available in the code? We need to hear that from our focus groups and our outreach. Residential subdivision developments, you know, that's a big conflict point, that we're a growing county, but do we want to have the growth occur where there's infrastructure, or are we okay with sprawl going into the agricultural areas that we're trying to conserve? And what does that subdivision look like if it is going to go into those areas? Is it 1 acre lots? Is it 14,000 square foot lots? Is it 3 acre lots? Is it 5 acre lots? That's a big part of it. So lot size is there. We initially started having this conversation about multiple dwelling units on a single lot. So that's certainly part of the conversation. Setbacks is 100 feet in AGC too much, is 50 feet in RUD too little, things like that. Similar for road frontage. That's typically based off of the road that your lot is on. So are those too wide? Is that creating too many problems for folks, or is that sufficient from a safety perspective? Things like that. Plan exemption, which is essentially a road access variance that's granted administratively. So that's certainly part of the conversation that happens in some other districts, but most often in the rural areas. Lot area, how you measure that, we had that discussion on council, and there was a feeling that maybe it was less of an issue if lot area included right-of-way in rural areas as opposed to more suburban areas or urban areas. Tree conservation and open space, that's tied to zoning districts, so that's handled differently based on your zoning district. So how does that come into play? And the evolution of the county code over time, there's been a lot of dialogue about that. So making clear what's changed, what hasn't, when it changed, and all of that. So that's part of the ongoing discussion as well. So that's our scope. And there's a lot to it.
There's a lot.
So it's going to take us some time, and we want to do it right,
Yeah.
because we don't want to be doing the same
No,
project
we
year
don't.
in and year out.
Right.
And the public input's going to be an important part of it. But we did want to come to you all at the outset to make sure we're on the right track before we start delving in pretty deep.
Let me ask you this question. You mentioned sprawl early on in your list. Since I've been on council, I've heard that term, and we don't want sprawl. Has there ever been a situation in the last 10 years that we say, this is why we don't want urban sprawl, because of this?
Yeah, I
Because
think
we protect against it, but so what's the danger? Because
the answer that comes to mind most often is a lot of the angst in the Lake Wiley community, and that's because when zoning was first applied in the mid-'80s, for whatever reason, the decision to apply some of our, and we don't have any really dense districts, honestly, when we're talking about a national scale, we don't really have high density districts. But your moderate density districts, those were all painted into Lake Wiley's by right when the land was all vacant. So that community, the folks that had been there for a long time, their experience was not dissimilar to really western and southern parts of the county where it's really rural and there's not much there. You have a lake, but there's not a lot of residential homes there. But there's all this by right zoning that's just waiting for developers to come in. And once the 2000s hit, all that land started getting bought up, and Charlotte becomes a boom city. Now we're the next door neighbors, and all the developers are looking for, well, where can I, outside of Charlotte, build big, large communities? And here's all this by right zoning waiting in Lake Wiley. So that's where the sprawl hit, because it was already ready.
I mean, I don't think you've left anything out. I think it's a lot.
what kind
A lot of stuff.
of, yeah.
A lot of work.
In your opinion, Jonathan, how long would it,
How long is this gonna take?
yeah.
That's one of those kind of.
And I'm hearing maybe it's gonna be staff generated?
Yeah.
So they've got to fit that in with the day-to-day routines, right?
That's right. Yeah, we don't, this is not a project we anticipated, so there's no budget to go out and hire a consultant. And this is a larger project, so it's not one to say that we couldn't necessarily do on our own, but this is one you would typically hire a consultant for. But we don't have the budget for that, and we're capable of doing it in-house, but it is on top of everything else that we're doing, so we want you to be aware of that. So there is a capacity limitation, so it would take at least 6 months, if not more than that, to do it all.
Which is the big reason for the time frame. But there's value having staff do this.
Mhm.
Yes.
We just need everybody to know that it's gonna take time. But we think that time is well
I know.
spent.
I mean, I know you guys are overworked, but I do think that the staff, this is a situation, you work with this every single day. A lot.
Yeah.
Many
We-
times.
yeah.
So you have an intimate knowledge that, someone else would not have. They'd have to work to catch up with what you guys know,
That's right.
so.
But we're committed to getting it done and diving into it. We want to make sure y'all understand.
I'm
from the get-go
excited
how
to
long
see
might
it,
take.
just see
Yeah.
what you were talking about, because I knew it was gonna be a lot, but I had no idea. Is this something that the whole council should see?
Well, I think so. I think what we're trying to do though is because this originated with y'all, we want to come back to y'all, make sure there's something that makes sense to y'all and think it captures what all of council has talked about. So those 3 items, we talked about self-storage the other night. We'll set that aside. This is the other big one of those 3 items. So what we want to make sure
Yes.
the entire council knows is the planning department is making movement and moving forward on addressing what we've heard in those meetings.
Yes.
But this is a very different project than the other ones. And so I think once y'all feel like this captures it, what staff can do is put this in a memo format, and I'll share with the entire council.
Yeah,
As just a heads up, this is what we're doing.
this is what's happening.
We're happy to answer your questions, but it was very clear that council wants us to move forward on this. We just want to make sure we move forward in the right thing, we didn't miss anything. I think Jonathan and his team have captured everything I remember. That doesn't mean we might have forgotten one little thing here or there, but.
And it might be good, and maybe you all have already thought of it, but, there's a lot of unexpected things that can happen if you say it's going to take, just shooting a figure out, 6 months. And
You
who
don't
knows
need
what
it.
happens, and you get waylaid, and then it takes 9 months or a year. So I think you really have to think, and I'll give you an example. And a moratorium would probably be a bad word here, and I don't think it's necessary, but, we did a moratorium and the R word, back in Georgia, and we thought we could do it in 6 months, but it took 7.5 or 8. And we were doing it in an environment where things were beginning to pop. But in that circumstance, I told our equivalent of council that we don't want this thing to go on too long with a moratorium, because you will be inundated when the moratorium's over with. And in this case, I think we want to keep the ball rolling, or moving down the field, I guess is a better way to say it. So I think you need to be very intentional, cautious, conservative in trying to figure out how long it's going to take, so expectations can be managed.
And as we make progress, we'll continue to update this committee as we
Okay.
meet more regularly.
Sounds good.
And maybe you can prioritize them in chunks and things.
Yeah. I like that idea too. Okay,
I'll approve the minutes.
so we are down to approving the minutes from the meeting from October the 23rd. I have a motion.
So moved.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And is there any items for executive session?
Move me.
Okay. So, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And I second? And all in favor?
We're out.
Yeah. Okay.